Jack had always been the kind of boy whose energy could light up a room. At just 12 years old, he possessed a curiosity that turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. The world, in his eyes, was a vast playground brimming with endless possibilities. Whether scaling the tallest tree in the neighborhood or wading through the creek behind his house to uncover hidden treasures, Jack had a knack for weaving adventure into the fabric of everyday life. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind where the sky seemed to stretch forever in its perfect blue expanse. Jack was eager to meet his friends at the local park, his bike freshly polished and gleaming in the sunlight. He waved to neighbors as he sped down the quiet suburban streets, his laughter carrying on the gentle breeze. Everything about the day felt ordinary, save a deceptive calm before the storm. As Jack approached the intersection near the park, the faint rumble of an engine broke through his thoughts. A delivery truck, much larger and faster than expected, came hurtling down the road. The driver, distracted by the glow of his phone screen, didn't notice the boy on the bicycle until it was far too late. Jack, too engrossed in the joy of the ride, saw the truck only at the last second. The world seemed to shatter in an instant. Tires screeched, rubber burning against asphalt, but there was no time to stop. The truck's horn blared, a harsh and desperate cry, as Jack turned his head. The impact was sudden and brutal. His small frame flung into the air like a rag doll before crashing down onto the cold, unforgiving pavement. The scene froze in the minds of those who witnessed it. Neighbors rushed to his side, their faces pale with shock, their voices quivering as they shouted for help. Jack's bike lay mangled beneath the truck's tires, a grim testament to the violence of the moment. When the paramedics arrived, they worked with swift precision, their faces masks of professional calm as they tried to stabilize him. Jack's parents arrived minutes later, their faces etched with panic and fear. His mother dropped to her knees beside the ambulance, clutching her husband's arm as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking, "please, save my son." Inside the ambulance, the air was thick with urgency. Machines beeped steadily, marking time Jack didn't seem to have. And then, as if the world itself held its breath, the monitor emitted a single, unwavering tone. Jack's heart had stopped. Jack felt the world fall away. The noise, the pain, the cold pavement beneath him, all of it faded into a profound silence. For a moment, he wasn't anywhere. The overwhelming chaos of the accident dissolved into a strange stillness, as if the very fabric of reality had unraveled. Then, he opened his eyes, or at least, it felt like he died and found himself in a place that defied comprehension. The air shimmered, alive with an ethereal light that wasn't just bright. It was warm, inviting, and alive. Colors he had never seen before, colors that didn't exist in the world he knew, danced in gentle waves across an infinite horizon. Jack stood on what felt like solid ground, yet it didn't resemble anything physical. It was soft underfoot, almost like the feeling of standing on a cloud or a dream. Jack wasn't afraid. If anything, a sense of peace, unlike anything he'd ever known, wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. There was no pain here, no fear, just an overwhelming sense of love that seemed to radiate from the very air. He looked around, searching for answers, but there were no walls, no ceiling, no markers of space or time. Only endless, radiant light stretching in every direction. And then, a voice broke the silence. "Jack." It wasn't a voice that traveled through the air. It resonated within him, filling every corner of his being with its power and gentleness. He turned, and before him stood a figure bathed in light. The presence was neither overwhelming nor intimidating, but its very essence carried a gravity that made Jack's knees tremble. The figure stepped closer, the light softening to reveal features that were kind and full of wisdom. Jack didn't need to ask who it was. He knew. "Jesus," Jack whispered, his voice trembling with awe. Jesus smiled, his expression filled with compassion and purpose. "You have come here for a reason," he said, his voice rich with both authority and kindness. "Your time is not yet over, but before you return, there is something you must understand." Jack's heart raced, not with fear, but with a sense of something far greater than himself. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, but his thoughts tangled in the enormity of the moment. Jesus seemed to sense this and placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. The touch sent a wave of calm through him, steadying his racing mind. "There is much to show you," Jesus continued, his tone gentle yet firm. "And much you must tell others. What lies ahead for humanity is both full of promise and fraught with peril. The choices your world makes will shape everything." The ground beneath them began to shift, and the light around them seemed to ripple, revealing glimpses of what lay ahead. Jack saw cities, landscapes, and faces, each vision more vivid and mysterious than the last. The journey had begun, and Jack felt both awe and purpose as he prepared to follow. As Jack followed Jesus, the world around them transformed into a vivid tapestry of shifting images. It was as if they were walking through time itself, each step revealing a new scene. At first, the visions were breathtaking. Jack saw sprawling cities with gleaming towers powered entirely by the sun. Vehicles glided silently along streets, lined with trees, their branches heavy with fruit. People moved with purpose, their faces glowing with hope and collaboration. It was a world that felt alive, thriving under a banner of unity and innovation. "This," Jesus said, his voice steady and calm, "is what humanity can achieve when it chooses compassion over greed, wisdom over recklessness. This is the promise of your world's potential." Jack couldn't take his eyes off the images. He saw oceans sparkling with clarity, forests regrown and teeming with life, and communities working together to rebuild what had been lost. For a moment, it felt like a glimpse of paradise within reach. But as the light shifted, the visions began to change. The cities Jack had just marveled at began to flicker and fade. The trees withered, their vibrant green leaves curling into ash. Streets, once bustling with life, were now filled with chaos, people shouting, fighting over resources, their faces twisted with desperation. Fires raged across landscapes, consuming forests and cities alike, while dark clouds choked the sky. The once bright oceans turned black, their waves crashing against barren shores. Jack's heart sank. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice trembling. Jesus turned to him, his expression somber yet resolute. "Dreams are fragile, Jack," he said. "Without love and humility to guide them, the same power that builds wonders can destroy them." As Jack watched, he noticed faces in the crowd. Among them was a man he recognized from pictures. His dad often showed him a man with a sharp gaze and an intensity that seemed to burn even in these flickering visions. It was Elon Musk. Jack had heard his name before, tied to rockets, electric cars, and big ideas. But why was he here? "Why him?" Jack asked, confused. "Why show me Elon Musk?" Jesus' gaze softened, though his voice remained firm. "He is a man of great potential," he explained. "His actions will influence the course humanity takes, but potential alone is not enough. Every choice he makes, every choice anyone makes ripples through existence. The future does not rest on his shoulders alone, Jack. It belongs to all of you." The scenes shifted again, showing Elon standing at a podium, speaking to a crowd. Then he was in a boardroom, debating with others, and finally, alone, staring at the stars with a weight of responsibility etched into his features. Jack could feel the enormity of those decisions, the way they shaped everything he had just seen. "But how do I make people understand this?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jesus placed a hand on Jack's shoulder again, his touch warm and grounding. "You don't need to make them believe. You need only to share what you have seen." The light around them began to ripple once more, signaling the end of this journey. Jack felt the weight of the message settle in his chest, even as the vision of the future faded into light. The light around Jack began to intensify, pulling him away from the serene presence of Jesus and the extraordinary visions of what could be. He felt himself being drawn backward, as if carried by an invisible tide. The warmth and peace of the radiant realm began to fade, replaced by the cold, sharp sensations of the physical world. Jack's chest ached, his body felt heavy, and each breath burned like fire. Then came the sounds, distant voices, urgent and frantic, growing louder with each second. "He's back. We've got a pulse," someone shouted. Jack's eyes fluttered open, met by the harsh glare of hospital lights. Faces crowded around him, doctors and nurses moving with precise urgency, their expressions a mixture of shock and relief. His mother appeared beside him, tears streaming down her face as she gripped his hand tightly. "Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you are here. Thank God you are here." His father stood behind her, his face pale and drawn, but his eyes glistened with gratitude. Jack wanted to speak, to reassure them, but his body refused to cooperate. His throat felt dry, his limbs weak, and his mind swirled with the remnants of what he had experienced. The weight of it was overwhelming, an unshakable truth pressing against his chest, demanding to be shared. As the days passed, Jack slowly began to recover. The hospital room became his new world, a place where time felt frozen. His parents stayed close, their quiet prayers filling the space between conversations. Friends and neighbors sent balloons and cards, their messages of support offering brief distractions. But no one knew what Jack carried within him. The visions of the future, the message from Jesus, and the name Elon Musk echoed endlessly in his thoughts. One evening, as the golden light of sunset spilled through the hospital window, Jack finally spoke. His mother sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap as she gazed out at the fading sky. "Mom," Jack said, his voice hoarse but steady. She turned to him, her eyes wide with anticipation. "I need to tell you something." She leaned closer, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. Jack took a deep breath, the words catching in his throat. "When I was gone, I saw something, someone." His mother's brow furrowed, her hand reaching for his. "What do you mean, Jack?" "I saw Jesus," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "He showed me things about the future. He said I needed to tell people, to share what I've seen." His mother's grip tightened, her face softening with a mix of disbelief and worry. "Jack, are you sure? Maybe it was a dream? Or—" "It wasn't a dream," Jack interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "It was real," he said. "He said the choices we make matter, that they'll shape everything." Though his mother didn't respond immediately, Jack saw something shift in her eyes, a flicker of belief, perhaps, or the weight of wanting to believe. It was a start. Once Jack was discharged from the hospital, life seemed to slip back into its usual rhythms, or at least, that's how it appeared on the surface. Friends visited, his parents tried to recreate a sense of normalcy, and neighbors greeted him with cautious joy. But Jack wasn't the same. The carefree boy who had left home that sunny afternoon was gone, replaced by someone carrying a truth too vast for words. At first, he hesitated to share what he'd experienced. The weight of the visions, the enormity of Jesus' message, and the responsibility of it all felt insurmountable. How could he, a 12-year-old boy, explain what he had seen? Who would believe him? These doubts gnawed at him as he sat in his room, staring out at the world he now saw differently. But the words Jesus had spoken echoed in his mind. "You don't need to make them believe. You need only to share what you have seen." One evening, Jack gathered his courage. His family sat around the dinner table, chatting about the day, when he cleared his throat. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice trembling. "About what happened to me when I was gone." The table grew still. His father exchanged a glance with his mother, who nodded for Jack to continue. Slowly, he recounted everything: the light, the peace, the voice of Jesus. He described the visions of the future, the thriving cities, the devastation, and the name, Elon Musk. When he finished, the silence was deafening. His younger sister looked at him with wide eyes, a mixture of awe and confusion on her face. "Why would Jesus talk about Elon Musk?" she asked quietly. Jack shrugged, his voice steady despite the doubt lingering in the air. "I think it's not just about him. It's about all of us. The choices we make, the things we do, they matter more than we realize." His parents remained quiet for a long moment before his father finally spoke. "That's a lot to take in, Jack," he said gently. "But maybe you are right. Maybe we all need to think more about the choices we make." Encouraged by their response, Jack began sharing his story with others. It started small: close friends, teachers, and neighbors who had been praying for him. Some listened with open hearts, moved by his conviction. Others dismissed it as the product of a traumatized mind. But Jack didn't let the skepticism deter him. As word spread, invitations began to come in. A teacher asked him to speak at a school assembly. A pastor invited him to share his story at church. Each time he told it, he stuck to the truth, never embellishing or forcing belief. He simply planted the seeds, trusting they would grow in the hearts of those ready to receive them. Jack came to understand that his message wasn't about Elon Musk alone. It was about humanity's potential to rise above division, greed, and apathy. Every person had a role to play, no matter how small. The future wasn't shaped by one individual, but by the collective weight of countless choices. And as Jack lay in bed one night, staring at the stars through his bedroom window, he felt something he hadn't in weeks: peace. He couldn't predict what would come of his efforts, but he knew he had done what he was meant to do. He had shared the message, and in doing so, he had fulfilled his purpose.